All right, Lucas, we're going to get started with Guide 19, the 2000 Hinata Kagura SX. And this is going to be a solid video because you're going to have the old lady in the background here tearing down a Christmas tree. So enjoy that eye candy. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's take the order. I didn't even read the story. Gosh darn it. Can we look at the story here? I don't think we can. That's too bad. Oh, here we go. Hey, it's RM. Can we click on it? I don't know. Kind of scrolls, I guess. Comprehensive renovation of the suspension. I think it's a good idea. For a longer episode, let's roll. Okay, so short and sweet description. So we've worked on this car for this guy before. I'm blanking on what we did to this vehicle, but anywho, so right now this is interesting because it's a story order that doesn't have an oil change involved with it, but we have 7 pages of parts to address. So this will be interesting. The other thing, if you're looking at well, it doesn't show on this, never mind. So obviously he took it and ran it through the desert because it's filthy. So let's go over to the car wash and give her a wash. Pardon now? No, we have not done this video, actually. We've worked for this customer before. Well, they're all in the desert. They're all dirty. Now we have, little chirping in the background here on the video, so enjoy that. That'll be fun. Well, we have a lot of dirty cars, and as a good mechanic, we wash the car for our customer. That's what we do. My God. This makes the video more entertaining. All right, let's move it to the old test path. Let's see if it'll actually start. So, hey, it does. All right. So we can use the test path the way it's intended to test the suspension and test the brakes. Now, I think I've done this once, Luke. I can't remember. But you pop up here, you go to the first stop point, you hold your brake, it tests the front brakes, which are in just outstanding condition, 2 and 5%, so they're terrible. Let's go up to the rear brakes, hold the brake, and the rear brakes are just they're near factory. I mean, they're 11%, 5%. They're solid. Let's check the front suspension. 10 and 10%. I mean, that's solid. I wouldn't change anything. This car is pristine. And look at the rear suspension. I mean, it's good. So 1% pretty much across the board. Everything that was tested is in shit condition. So we got work, is what I'm telling you, fellers. We got work. We got some work to do. Let's do a little inspection this way as well, just by laying your old peepers on it and seeing what we get. Oh, we got peepers, and we have a lot of commentary from the peanut gallery in the background here, so that's helpful. Let's check this side. Oh my goodness. I mean, everything on this thing is just trash. So I don't think we're going to be finding like any parts that we're saving or salvaging or rescuing. I think this is just a complete tear down and rebuild, just kind of like the guy said. All right, let's see. Let's go to normal view, check our pages. There's just a few parts that are not discovered. And just based on the inspection here, I think it's going to be rear springs, the front springs, probably the steering rack, because we haven't identified that yet. So basically it's just what the guy said, a complete suspension rebuild for this car. All right, let's take her over to rack 1 and we'll crank it up in the air and get after it. elevate head. And let's go ahead and check our inventory. Okay, so I didn't clean out my parts from the last job, so let's clear that out first. So let's sell all parts that are below 50%. Got a rubber bushing here that's bad, and we get rid of those. We'll pop the case and open ticket 1 and 2. Hey, we got a bonus case. That's fun. Let's pop 3 and 4. Another bonus case. You're seeing my pattern here, right? So let's open 5 and 1 and a barn map. So 2 barn maps, some XP, and I think we just leveled our mechanic again. Can we get... Yes. We have 2 skill points. We can't unlock Eagle Eye 5 yet, so I'll just save my skill points. Alright, let's go ahead and pull the front suspension off. I just have a hankering here that, or a suspicion, there's going to be no parts that are repairable. Those drive axles might be, but those might not even be parts the customer wants repaired. We might just repair them just to say we've repaired something. Actually, this is pretty similar to how I would start like a full restoration for a car you pick up from the junkyard, for example. I would pop in, I'd repair the frame first, and then clean the car, take down the interior. Then I would go through this process of tearing all the suspension out of the vehicle, tear the engine out, and then start to restore and rebuild. If you saw the 3-star series on the Ford or the Fiat, you would have seen that that kind of restoration, tear down, rebuild that I was discussing just a second ago. All right, little WD-40 on the old rusty bolts. Get the lower suspension arm out here. Now, if you ever can't see the bolt, a lot of times I have it set so that my mechanic doesn't zoom as I click on parts unless I tap click like that. If you know that there's like 3 bolts and you're going to click one and you hear that clicking sound, it's just rusted. Just right click. All right, get that. Last few rubber bushings out here. And we'll drop the cross member. All right, so the front suspension is done and addressed. We're gonna have to pull the drive shaft so that we can get the rear cross member off. And remember, you can't really zoom close on these bolts, so just remember that there's 4 bolts on the drive shaft, up, down, side to side. And if you get to one and you can't get it off, it's probably rusted. Right click. So drive shaft is off. Let's pull the rear. I'm curious if they're going to want us to address the wheels and tires. That might be some of the parts, which will have the percentages on these now that we've pulled the wheels. Let's grab that little small rubber bushing. That one that sits back there is one I sometimes forget. You'll get used to seeing these different suspension setups and get pretty familiar with the layouts, there's only a few. So then you'll start to remember where each of the parts lay out on each of the vehicles. So especially if you do customer jobs for like the same kind of vehicle over and over again, you'll get pretty pretty good at remembering where the parts lay out and how they go together. Which probably in real life, I'd assume that'd be the case. Like if you're a mechanic for just one brand of car, you probably get pretty accustomed to what parts are broken, how they go together, what parts are difficult to remove, etc. I wonder if that'd be a way to roleplay this game, like only work on Fords or only work on Chevys. Probably. And I'm going to stop in these later videos, Luke, kind of describing every part, because I think you're going to start to get an understanding of this. So if I start to go too fast through these, or you need more specifics about what we're thinking about with each of these story cars, you let me know. But I think you're probably starting to get this now, I think. Okay, little small rubber bushing. We'll get all this tore down, then we can see if there's anything we can repair. Like I said, I just have a suspicion that we're going to have nothing to repair. Separate out the shocks just to have the different parts separated out. The tires, they're 23 and 16. He may not want those replaced. Let's just check the pages of parts here. Have we identified everything? We have. And I don't see rim or tire listed on the repairs, so we don't have to deal with that. Okay, so that's one thing. I think they had disc brakes. The disc brakes must be below. Yep, they're all below 10%, so we can't even turn the rotors. Is there parts we can repair? Well, there is some. The brake cylinders, which go into the caliper. Those drive axles, honestly, I don't think the customer needed these repaired, but, you know, we're just repairing them. We teared this off. Why would you do the whole suspension on a guy's car and, like, put on the 16% axles? Why not just fix them? And a wheel hub we can repair. All right, so we got some parts that were repairable. All right, let's save that so we don't lose that. Then I'm going to go in here, look at all parts, and I'm going to sort by condition, putting the crappy ones at the top. And we'll just right-click all these parts. Because we have to buy all of these. So I think the point of this story car is to show you how to do like a full restoration where everything needs to be replaced. All right, so we got everything there. Let's go to our car store. Okay, the clutch plate, clutch bearing, that was from our previous order. So we need 16 rubber bushings. Now we're starting to get to the point where buying excess of this may be a reasonable option. And what my point is that rubber bushings are things that are used on every single vehicle. You're going to start to do more repairs. It's going to be a common part that's repaired across every single vehicle. We just need 16 for this repair. We're at $60,000, so we have a fair amount of money built up right now. So my advice would be on routine parts like this, buy the max. And the point is, is that we know we're going to have to deal with this going forward to repair those parts. Brake pads, same issue. Every brake job, the brake pads are the same across every car in the game. Honestly, at this point, I would just have an inventory of them. I'd go ahead and buy 50 brake pads. We're a mechanic shop. We're going to do brake jobs. We're going to do them very frequently. Why not just have a pile of them? Now, is this an investment? Yeah, it's an investment, but you'll get this money back, and it just saves you the time of having to remake a parts list for simple things, like a spring cap. Those are used on every car for that type of suspension. Rear shock absorbers, same thing. They're pretty common. You use them on a lot of cars. Now, that's probably excessive to buy $3,000 worth of them and have 50 of them, but could we buy, let's say, a dozen? Sure. That would get you 6 cars that use rear shock absorber A's, right? Front wheel hubs. These are common parts. They're used almost on every car. I'm just going to buy a pile. So all of a sudden, we're going to have... Now, wheel housing, knuckle housings, they're different on different cars. So for a part like this, I'd probably buy a dozen. So we're investing in parts is what we're doing. Rear suspension arms. They're used on a lot of cars on this modern type looking suspension. They can be repaired, so we'll just buy a dozen. Rear suspension arms, we'll buy a dozen. Partially because these aren't used on... we bought 50 spring caps. Let's just buy 50 rear ones. End links, they're pretty common. Let's buy a pile. Now, obviously, I'm buying a bunch of parts. Are we going to get all this back? Calipers. Now, calipers you can repair. So if you get calipers off cars that you're doing brake jobs on, you can repair them. Steering racks. They're common parts. You use them across a lot of cars. Generally, they're repairable. I would just buy one because it's expensive. End links. Now, these are used on every car. Well, not every car, but a lot. I'll just buy a pile. We'd have to buy those again. Vented disc brakes. Most of the time, you can turn those, so I wouldn't buy a bunch. Wheel bearings, they're the same on every single car. Have a pile. Front cross suspension member. Now, these are different on different cars, and it's an expensive part, so we'll just buy one. Tie rods. Tie rods are tie rods are tie rods. They're not different across cars. So, buy a bunch of the inner ones. They're also not repairable. Small rubber bushings, just like the normal rubber bushings. They're a wear item. You can't repair them. They're used on every car. Lower suspension arm. Pretty common part. I don't want to invest that much in lower suspension arms. So let's buy a dozen. Rear wheel hubs. Just like the front hubs, which we bought a bunch of. So we're going to buy a bunch of these. Now we're burning through our money, but we'll get this. This is an investment in the stuff that you're going to have to deal with at some point. We'll just buy a dozen front springs. Outer tie rods, same thing. Like I said, these are parts that are used across so many vehicles. I would just have an inventory of them. Brake disc, I wouldn't buy excess of those, partially because you can generally repair them. Front drive axle H, we just need one. Front shock absorber, we'll buy a couple, maybe a dozen. Now I'll show you what we can do with these in a second. Front axle cover, common. Now we have a bunch. Rear sway bars. They're different on every vehicle, so I wouldn't buy a bunch. Same for the cross members. Front shock absorber cap. Well, we just bought a bunch of springs and bought a few shocks. I'm just going to buy a bunch of those. Rear suspension arm. Buy a dozen. Front knuckles. They're different on cars. I'm just going to buy 2 for now because that's what we need. Wheel hubs. They're pretty universal. There's different kinds, obviously, because that was Wheel Hub 3. But they're ones that are used pretty commonly. I'll buy a dozen rear springs. And a front sway bar. So now we've invested a lot in parts. But, again, these are parts that you're going to use going forward, so they will pay for themselves and just save you the time of having to shop with every vehicle that you're having to go to repair. All right, so now let's go to our spring loader. Let's join the parts. Now we have a bunch. So I would just join these up. Then for cars that you end up using the front shock absorber A, we already have them joined. The dual wishbone shock absorber, that's another one that's very common. When you find a car that has that, buy a dozen, make up a dozen of them. Then you'll be ahead of the game as far as having to stop to do your repair to just join these parts up. And like I said, you're building a mechanic shop, so why not have a stockpile of parts? Now you can get the warehouse too and store these parts in your warehouse if you don't want to keep them on your character. I think there's in my head two schools of thought on that. If I keep them on my character, I have to scroll through a lot of parts, especially if I'm going through to paint a part or I'm going through to upgrade parts to 3 stars, and you'll see that on my other video where I have to scroll through long lists of parts to find the one part that I want to improve or upgrade, which is fine. I think in my head, some people probably get annoyed by that. That's where using the warehouse could be very useful. You dump the parts in the warehouse, you're looking for suspension parts, pop in there and get them. Now the issue I guess I would have with that compared to keeping them in your inventory, if they're in your inventory, you're on the car, you pulled off the bad one, you can go ahead and slap on the new one right then. You don't have to go over to your warehouse to pick it up. Okay, these are the bad parts. So that's my thought, is that if you're going to take the time to buy extra parts and have an inventory of parts, keep them on your mechanic, especially for the wear item parts. The ones that I will keep in the warehouse for myself personally is body panels. Body panels you're not going to use universally on every car, so I have an inventory in my warehouse of a whole bunch of repaired body panels. So if I end up working on a Subaru or I end up working on a Corvette, whatever, I'll go into the warehouse, pull out all the Corvette body panels, repair those body panels that I can repair, replace the ones with the ones I already had in my warehouse, and then I throw them back in the warehouse. Sorry, I know there was a lot of talk on that, but I think that's useful. And you can see, like right now, if I went in here, I have a bunch of knuckles. So the next car that has that same knuckle, I already have a pile of them. If I had taken that off and I just had to repair that part, boom, it's already there. It's already in my inventory. I can grab it, slap it on, and I'm ready to go to the next part. Same for brake calipers. You know, now we got a pile of them, so we're good to go for a while. Wheel bearings, we got a bunch. And you'll kind of get a flavor for which parts that you're going to use very frequently on your particular rebuilds, or on the cars that you're going to take the orders for pretty consistently. And then you can start to build your own inventory of parts, of which parts are going to be important for you to have in your inventory. So it's individual. This is just the way I like to play. I think it's useful. Take it for what you will and make your own choice. And that games like this, these sandbox type of games, even though I'm not playing it sandbox mode, there's no progression like you have to do X, Y, or Z. You don't have to do all the story orders. I'm just choosing to do all the story orders in the guide. You can play it the way you want to play it, you know? Perfectly fine. Ah, we're missing an end link here. It's like, why can't we put the tire on? Because we missed an end link. Alright, then we can put the crappy wheel back on. I didn't check. We'll check on the other side. Was there different size wheels on this car? Or are they the same? Nope, they're the same. So we don't have to worry about front to rear wheels. Grab a couple of rubber bushings. Okay. Get over here, get that knuckle on. That small rubber bushing. I always like to do that one because I tend to forget it. Then we can put the spring on and spring cap. There we go. The upper suspension arm. Wheel hub. The rear wheel hub. There's a bearing. Brake disc. Drive axle. And some brake pads. Brake calipers. That little end link. Then we can get that shock absorber on. And this rear suspension arm and its subsequent rubber bushing, and then a tire and rim, of course. And I think we missed one rear suspension arm there. All right, so that's on. Now we can go ahead and hook on that drive shaft, which we went ahead and repaired it for the guy. Which I don't believe it was on the parts that he wanted repaired, but again, sometimes I'm just a nice mechanic. I just like to do things for the customer sometimes. Rubber bushing, let's go ahead and slap that on. That way you don't forget to do the ones that go in the cross member. Okay, get the steering rack on. And the sway bar tie rods. Get the knuckle on this side. And then the outer tie rod. Knuckle cover. Front wheel hub. A little bearing. Get that front shock absorber, and you can see we have extras now. Front end link. Drive axle. Lower suspension arm. And the rubber bushings. And ventilated disc brake. Brake pad. Caliper. And cylinder. And front wheel. There we go. We'll pop over to this side, get the knuckle, inner tie rod, outer tie rod, lower suspension arm with a couple of bushings, shock, and then the subsequent end link. Knuckle cover, front wheel hub, and a bearing, and a vented disc brake. Oh, hang on. Put on the wrong disc brake. Alright, unmount. Alright, mount. Let's put on the nice one. I must have accidentally clicked on the red one. Alright, caliper. And then that last wheel. So it's got a full suspension rebuild on this bad boy. Let's check its status. Go to the phone. And he is a happy customer. We got everything done. It's an $11,000 job. So honestly, that's not insignificant. We still only have 2 available skill points. To unlock this, it takes 5. So we're just going to save our skill points. Inventory. Let's sell parts that are below 30%. And now we have, as you can see, we have a good inventory built up of some parts that we're hanging on to. So it does make for a long list of parts, but there's a way around that. So the way around that, put a macro on your mouse that has you click fast. Mine's just set to left click. I hold it down, it goes brrr, clicks right through things. Where did we leave off? Let's do 3 and 4. More XP and a barn map. Hey, that XP just leveled us up. Maybe we can get, we have 8 available skill points. We can get the next level of Eagle Eye. All right, so we got 3. We're gonna hold out and save to get the last point of Eagle Eye, then we'll start getting walking faster. Let's go ahead and save the game. Pop out here. And our next one is a 2003 Sixon Cebulian. Looks like a body panel, spray it factory color, change oil. There might be some other issues with this car. But we're going to go ahead and end this video here. We'll be back the next one, but just to recap, we did the story car, we learned how to make an inventory of parts, and we did a full suspension rebuild, so that's pretty sweet. Lucas, Isaac, Parker, hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.